Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Life in Babylon. Babylon was an ancient kingdom in Mesopotamia. From between 1792 and 1750 BC, the kingdom was ruled over by a king named Hammurabi. Archaeologists have discovered so many tablets and ancient texts that they've been able to put together a picture of what life was like in Babylon nearly 4,000 years ago. If you walked through Babylon during the rule of Hammurabi, you would be flanked on both sides by tall walls of mud brick and the occasional door. Each door passed to an open courtyard, to a kind of communal zone ringed by rooms and living spaces. These open courtyards provided light and air, and a place for people to socialize. For the ancient Babylonians, family was extremely important. These courtyards were also the locations of family burial plots. Right outside where people slept were buried bodies of their ancestors, going as far back as they could remember. Although, to be fair, that wouldn't have been more than a couple of generations. It was a patriarchal society. However, history professor Amanda Podany says that women in ancient Babylon had more rights than women in ancient Greece 1,000 years later. They could go to court by themselves, were allowed to own property, and were even allowed to be priests. That's something that women still can't do in Catholicism. And here's one more thing about family life in ancient Babylon. It was very rare for a couple to be divorced, or for a man to take a second wife. Marriage, thousands of years before the Christian God was ever invented, was considered a sacred thing in Babylonian society. The only excuse for taking a second wife was if the first wife couldn't bear a child. Number 9. The drug habits of the Maya. One of the most unique aspects of the Maya kingdom was their affinity for hallucinogenic drugs. The Maya were obsessed with reaching a state of what can only be described as spatial disorientation. In other words, getting so intoxicated on psychedelics, they felt as though they were becoming one with nature and speaking with the gods. These substances are called entheogens and can be traced back to at least 2,000 years ago during the Olmec era. They were consumed regularly until the Spanish showed up and started pillaging in the 16th century. The Maya would hold ceremonies in underground caves. They viewed these caves as sacred access points to the underworld, and when high on hallucinogens, their visions were intensified underground. One of their favorite things to consume was called balche, a drink infused with bark from the legume trees and fermented to make it mildly alcoholic. So much balche would be consumed that those participating in the ceremonies would usually vomit, increasing the intensity of their visions. Then there were the enemas. The Maya may have been a great civilization with powerful cities, but they were also obsessed with reaching maximum levels of intoxication. To do this, they would sometimes create a makeshift syringe from a gourd and some clay and inject pure hallucinogenic liquids into their rear ends to intensify the effects. Number 8. The Kingdom of the Cliffs. There are an estimated 10,000 man-made caves that can be found on the side of a cliff in the Himalayas, hidden far from the main roads and way out in the middle of nowhere. They were only recently discovered in Nepal, and the caverns remain one of the most mysterious archaeological wonders in the world. The kingdom that called this place home is mysterious, to say the least. We don't know their name or anything really about them. Archaeologists from the University of Cologne began exploring the caves in the 1990s and were shocked at just how difficult they were to reach. Even some of the best climbers could barely make it up the steep cliffs, leading experts to wonder how in the world the original inhabitants had even built them. Corey Richards, an adventure photographer who recently visited the remote caves, called it scary and dangerous. He said that just climbing to reach the caves was crazy, as it felt like the entire cliff was going to collapse at any second. The caves themselves are beyond bizarre. They were inhabited as far back as 1000 BC, and many of them were used as burial chambers. Families lived in the caves over the years, and by the 1400s, just 600 years ago, they were used as meditation chambers for religious zealots. Unfortunately, nobody knows who built them. There once was a mighty kingdom here, and archaeologists have found evidence of warring tribes battling for possession over the caves. yet barely any trace of the people remains. Number 7. The Women Warriors of Dahomey. The African kingdom of Dahomey flourished as recently as the 17th century. The kingdom was exceptional for one main reason. They were protected by a woman-only military regiment of fierce warriors. The kingdom came alive in present-day Benin in the year 1600. They were a major regional power, with a king who had absolute control over everything, from societal issues to economics. They had access to the sea, which helped them beat all the other coastal kingdoms nearby, giving them unprecedented dominance. But here's where things get uncomfortable. From between 1720 and 1852, the Dahomey ruled the slave trade. Historians have estimated that the Dahomey kingdom sold hundreds of thousands of people from neighboring tribes to the British, French, Portuguese, and anyone else who had money. This African kingdom grew rich and powerful by selling their enemies in the transatlantic slave trade. And then there's the part about the women warriors. It's not quite as progressive as it may seem. The issue was that too many raids on neighboring communities killed too many of their men. They lost so many men in battles that there was no choice but for women to become warriors as well. This wasn't something they did willingly from the start. The kingdom only welcomed women warriors into their ranks when they no longer had enough men to fight. The Dahomey slave trade came to a halt in 1852, when the British government outlawed it. The kingdom came to an end soon after when the French showed up. The Dahomey tried to raid the French camps and take them as slaves, but it backfired. In 1894, the Dahomey were crushed by the French. And now for number 6. But first, I want to say a big thank you to Mother's Load and What's His Name. Thanks so much for watching. If you are new here, welcome. And be sure to subscribe for more videos about amazing discoveries. Number 6. Vortigarn and the Saxons. In the 5th century, Vortigarn was the ruler of Britain. No one knows what his real name was, as Vortigarn was simply an old title that meant Supreme Lord or Great Chief. We only know that this individual ruled over Britain and was the one behind the invasion of the Saxons. This guy personally invited the Saxons to Britain as part of a failed attempt to stop the Picts from invading the south and taking over the region. The history of the Great Saxon Kingdom began with Vortigarn. The historian Gildas wrote that the Supreme Lord invited the Saxons to Britain in the year 449. The Saxons showed up with a massive fleet of ships. They were welcomed with open arms and treated like the saviors of Britain. They were brought from Europe as a heathen force of barbarians whose strength would help to defend the native Britons. But to understand why this was done, we need to look at what was happening with Rome. The Roman invasion of Britain started 400 years earlier, but by the year 410, the Roman Empire was in shambles. By 449, Rome was in the midst of being destroyed and had taken every garrisoned troop from Britain to fight wars. Even though the Romans were the invaders 400 years earlier, they had become the only thing protecting Britain from outside invasion. This left them vulnerable, and so the Picts from Scotland began moving south into Roman Britain. Across the channel on the mainland were the Saxons, a Germanic tribe in Germany. They were brought to Britain, but instead of protecting the lands they were supposed to, they took them over. The Saxons defeated the Romano-Britons and formed the Kingdom of West Saxons. They were the ones who brought what is now the English language to England, and they thrived on the British Isles until the 10th century. They conquered the rest of England and created the Anglo-Saxon Kingdom. Number 5. The Axumites. The Kingdom of Axum was at one point the mightiest empire in Africa. Its power and influence stretched far beyond its borders in East Africa to reach as far as Israel. Its heart was the city of Axum, founded in Ethiopia during the 1st century AD. The empire quickly became wealthy, the civilization expanded, and they became masters over African trading routes leading to the Roman Empire and stretching into India. The capital city of Axum was a sparkling metropolis with an estimated peak population of around 20,000. It was from this city that the Christian religion spread to the rest of Africa. But what makes the Axumite kingdom so mysterious is that nobody knows its origins. We know that humans lived in Ethiopia since well before the Stone Age, but there were never any civilizations here that we know about. According to National Geographic, the original Axumites, the ancestors of Ethiopians, may have come from across the Red Sea, migrating from the Arabian Peninsula. Whatever the case, Axum was undefeatable. The city was built on a plateau 2,000 meters above sea level. It was impossible to invade and was protected on 3 sides by countless miles of desert and mountain that would obliterate any army that tried to invade. They traded everything from rhino horns to frankincense. The legendary Queen of Sheba lived here, and it was the Axumites who took the Ark of the Covenant from the Holy Land and supposedly brought it back to Ethiopia. The downfall of this mysterious kingdom came in the 7th century. They lost their hold on Arabia, and the rise of the Islamic kingdoms ultimately sealed their fate. They weren't defeated and taken over, but simply made irrelevant. Number 4. The rise and fall of the Hemurite. In the southern part of Yemen, a mysterious people known as the Hemurite kingdom converted to Judaism at a time when Christianity was all the rage. The Hemurite had been living in Yemen since around 110 BC, but in the 4th century they started converting to Judaism, and by 425, a powerful Jewish kingdom had risen in the most unlikely of places. But as you can imagine, a kingdom ruled by the Jewish faith did not last long on the southern tip of Arabia. Its kings ruled for only a century until the Christian kingdom of Axum destroyed them in 525. The Axumites were already coming to an end, but just before their relevance was taken away, they gathered a massive force and crossed the Red Sea. They obliterated the Hemurite kingdom in one swift attack. Judaism in Yemen was wiped out overnight, and so were the Hemurites. Their descendants would rise up decades later and lead the South Arabian Muslim forces against the Arab Christian tribes in 638. Number 3. The Lost Atlantis. The ancient kingdom of Cantre'r Gwylod supposedly existed in Wales, specifically in Cardigan Bay. It was an island kingdom that flourished centuries ago, but was swallowed by the sea and has been lost ever since. There are a lot of different stories surrounding the Lost Kingdom, everything from failed dikes to an overflowing well. But the honest truth is that no one has ever been able to find irrefutable evidence that the kingdom ever existed. But there is still hope. A pair of researchers from Swansea University in Wales have been trying to find Cantre'r Gwylod using old medieval maps, folklore, field studies, and geological surveys. They are using all scientific means at their disposal to find it. One of the most interesting pieces of evidence comes from the Go map, which dates back to the 13th century. It's considered the oldest surviving map of the British Isles. And sure enough, there is a huge landmass in the south of Wales that isn't there anymore. 800 years ago, there was a whole lot more land. Going back even further to the days of Rome, famous cartographer Ptolemy created a map of the Welsh coastline showing that it went 8 miles deeper into the sea. This lost kingdom most likely did exist, but is currently under hundreds of feet of water. Number 2. The Lana Kingdom. There was a lot going on in Southeast Asia in the 13th century. There was the Mon Kingdom, the Hariphunchai, the Khmer Empire, and so many others. Thailand was ruled by individual kingdoms based in sprawling cities. It was not a unified nation as it is today, but much like ancient Japan or China, it was fractured into various warring empires. The Lana Kingdom took shape in the later part of the 13th century in the northern regions of Thailand. They had their capital at the ancient city of Chiang Mai, a city still standing today. The kingdom itself lasted until 1884, when the Kingdom of Siam adopted it as a province. The region slowly evolved until becoming a state in Thailand in 1949. And although most people view it as just another part of Thailand these days, the Lana Kingdom was an independent region with its own character and culture. First of all, the Lana people came from China's Yunnan province. They were originally called the Taiyuan and likely migrated into the region to escape the invasion of the Mongols in central China. As the Mongols were busy dismantling the Burmese kingdom of Bagan and terrorizing Europe, the Taiyuan were starting their own kingdom in the isolated jungles of Thailand's north. And there, sheltered by the thick trees and dense wilderness, they prospered unscathed for centuries. Number 1. Lydia. The kingdom of Lydia flourished for a very short time. Between the 7th and 6th centuries BC, it prospered in Asia Minor thanks to its natural resources and trading routes. Its greatest time was during the reign of Croesus, 560 to 546 BC. He and his great army conquered Greek cities near the coast, and they pushed the borders of the empire all the way to the outskirts of the Persian Empire. This proved to be a major mistake. Lydia, which geographically speaking was a major part of what is now Turkey, should not have messed with Persia. The Persian king Cyrus II smashed King Croesus in 546 and forced Lydia to become a Persian province. Then, when Alexander the Great came along, he defeated the Persian armies and absorbed Lydia in the 4th century. In 280 BC, Lydia was absorbed into the Seleucid Empire. What had, for a very brief moment in history, been a powerful kingdom became nothing more than a small piece of land, one that was absorbed by one mightier power and then the next. Thanks for watching! Which of these amazing ancient kingdoms would you have loved to be a part of? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!